Thanks for taking the time.
Yeah, man.
All right.
Hang on a minute. I gotta get some water.
Okay, that's fine. I got some too.
I wonder if I should change. Is there a way to change my background in this or no?
No, that's absolutely fine. That's good. It's going to be clearer and better, so it's fine. And after I record it, I can actually remove it if I need to totally and just have a green screen. So
Okay.
the main thing is just I know it's unnatural, but when you're giving some responses, find the white light or green light that's your camera and talk into that and resist the urge of like looking to yourself. That way I'll have eye contact on the I horrible at it, but I know I usually edit myself out of these and edit them together. So but I just want to ask you some questions. But before we get into the tech, how is your now you have a show dog? Is it a Belgian Malinois or German Shepherd?
German Shepherds.
German Shepherd.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah,
So,
four actually.
and so you act. I just remember when we first connected, you'd mentioned it, and I at the time was watching. I still am watching my son's mini Aussie, and so a German Shepherd might be more disciplined, but nonetheless, it's companionship. Do you breed them or do you show them?
We work with a breeder. We raise them essentially, but all four of mine are purebred from the same breeder. And I've shown two of them. One is actually actively showing now. He goes to Texas next week, 2 weeks for an event. And then I have two other dogs that have obedience titles, obedience and performance. Yeah.
Okay. So do you ever spend Thanksgiving Day at Prina doing the hoops and ramps and stuff, or is that a different?
That's a different kind of a performance. They do have that, but generally shepherds don't do really well at those. Not like there's other breeds that do much better at those events than shepherds do.
Okay. Well, they're pretty good. I remember growing up, I liked Hogan's Heroes, and they always had I think they were Belgians on top of the doghouse going up, and
Yeah, yeah,
they hated Germans and liked LeBeau. So that's
right,
my yeah. So that's my ground level, sort of reference point. But I knew you were
yeah.
good at it, and I feel like dogs are the original security system. They're loyal, alert, always on patrol. And speaking of security, let's talk about what's happening in cybersecurity right now. What are you seeing out there as far as how can I put this? What kind of? I mean, I know that you don't know all the cybersecurity threats that you're seeing, but as the year turns, are we still talking about phishing, ransomware, and has the landscape shifted?
Well, the cybersecurity space is forever evolving, right? As countermeasures are being created and services are being deployed, the bad guys keep working, to find ways or new ways around it, right? So, in terms of trends, regrettably, because many businesses, don't take it seriously. It can't happen to them. They're too small and nobody's looking. The countermeasures and services necessary to be safe are not being deployed. So you're still seeing hacks on small businesses. I spoke with a CFO just this past week, and there are 25 employees, and they had well over six figures exfiltrated from the organization. A couple of weeks ago, I talked to another CFO, 80 users, same thing, major hack, major funds exfiltrated. So it can happen to you, right? That's kind of the
Yeah,
motto. It can happen to you. Make sure that you've got, number one, the appropriate cyber measures in place, and number two, that you have cyber insurance. And you
yeah,
have to have the right policy too, because very often you won't get paid out on a cyber policy because you don't have the appropriate measures in place, or you attested to things that were in place that weren't. So it's real
definitely.
important to marry those two things together.
Yeah, and I think you need some maintenance too, because sometimes in the fine print, it means you must, do you know do your best to keep up with everything. So that's insightful. How are you handling endpoint detection and response these days? Are traditional antivirus solutions still a part of the stack, or is it all about EDR and XDR now?
Yeah, I would tell you that it's my feeling that in some vendors call it ADR, some call it XDR, some call it EDR, but it's advanced detection and response at its core. And I believe that is becoming the new standard. Advanced detection and response, or ADR, does active threat hunting. It's not just sitting back and waiting like the old endpoint security was signature based. Basic endpoint security is signature based. So it's only as good as the latest signature update, and it's waiting for an event to happen to try to block it versus actively looking for machine behaviors that may indicate a potential threat. And that's what the active threat hunting solutions do, and they're actively monitored. So when an alert happens, there's a 7 by 24 security operations center that's seeing that. So that is obviously inherently more thorough and more protective than traditional basic endpoint security.
Good. What's your take on user access control in hybrid environments? Are you still using zero trust conditional access or something else to manage risk along with those other solutions you mentioned?
Yeah, so there's two facets, right? One is, inbound into the network. Traditional VPN can still be effective. Zero trust is much more effective, obviously. And then there's also another piece that isn't always adhered to, and that is POLP, or the principle of least privilege. And that is ensuring that every user has only the access that they need to only the data and applications that they need, and nothing more than that. It's not unusual for us to walk into an environment and everybody's got administrative privileges, and that, of course, is a huge security risk.
So out of the gate, yeah, you're behind the eight ball, that and extra ways they can get you. So obviously when people come to you, how are you educating clients or prospects about identity based threats, MFA fatigue attacks, or session hijacking without like overwhelming them, without speaking in an alphabet soup of jargon? Or do you find that your clients are moderately educated and you just have to show them where the industry has gone since the last time they checked it out?
Yeah, so again, it's always evolving, right? So we have, our standards that we coach our customers and prospects on, and the things that they should have in place to protect their network. MFA is still, those two examples that I mentioned earlier, neither had MFA in place. So that's still something that you absolutely have to turn on. But to answer your question, we get the standards in place, and then we review on a regular basis with the customer their security profile, right? And so I think when I first created our proprietary security scorecard, which we use to measure the customer security profile, I think I had something under 30 different checkpoints for the customer, if you will, and it's approaching 50 now. So we're keeping that list up to date with the different countermeasures, different services that are available to help protect the customer, and then we're customizing the services and solutions for them that best fits their environment and their level of data protection they actually need.
So that where does that come like in the customer journey? Like I know that it all starts with a discovery call. On that call, do you have a filtering to see if there's a fit for the CTO level service that you provide, the high touch, or is it out of the gate? Here's tell me as much as you know about your situation and go from there. Where is there what's the process so that you know get a better understanding of that it's not just another meeting, another sales call. That's just about what we have to give to the customer, but how you delve deeper. I was always fascinating by that. You're almost looking for ways not to deal with them because you want to be the right fit just because it is so important.
Yeah, so the journey, as you referred to it, the first discussion is all discovery, right? Tell me what you know about your current situation, and it depends really on the level of technical sophistication of the customer, right? Because they may not be able to tell us anything. And in those cases, we go out on site and do a full discovery, and that's part of our onboarding process anyway. So we gather as much information as we can about their current status, where they are in their cybersecurity profile, and then take that information that gets passed over to the service team and in a handoff, and then the service team will go out on site during the onboarding process and do further technical discovery of what's deployed, how the network is architected, where there may be gaps, and then we come back. That information is all put together, and then we'll have a set of recommendations for the customer that will usually include cybersecurity services that should be deployed.
Excellent. I know that primarily deal, when you say customer, and if they know it, you primarily deal with business owners, which that might be a wild card on how much they know, but you also deal with, people that are in charge of IT of a company that might be overwhelmed, that might need some outside help. So could you tell us a little about the differences of how you approach each type of customer?
Sure. So for our typical customers, where they're engaging us for managed services, we become the entire IT department for them on a fractional basis, of course. So we're providing help desk, systems administration, network operations, security operations, and then very importantly, the a virtual chief information officer. So, and that person is from our team is somebody who has held that role or director level or higher. So we're providing guidance and strategy for the customer again in that journey. In a case where there's an IT department that exists, there's this concept of co-managed IT, and we are providing some fraction of our typical services, and it might be just cybersecurity services, it might be just help desk, it might be just server monitoring, but we're filling a gap that would exist within that IT department, whether that be a full department of 10 people or one person that just doesn't have enough hands, keep all the balls in the air. Or in some cases, hey, I need a gut check, right? So I need a partner that works alongside me to help keep me between the rails because I don't know all there is to know, right? If it's a one-man shop, they don't know everything. They're busy keeping everybody's PC repaired, right? It's hard to be proactive and think forward from a strategy perspective when your entire job is to make sure all the lights are on, so to speak.
That makes sense. So that it's a sliding scale. It's totally customized, and sometimes you're not there to replace, but to augment. And that's fascinating because there's a perception that IT in general has differentiation challenges. Everybody's the same, or you can go and get it on the internet, plug and play. But there's nothing to replace good old experience, collaboration to keep everything as high end as they can. And because it's fractional, it doesn't have to be an overwhelming budget item. Sometimes, in fact, it produces efficiency. Are you seeing that as well for people that didn't know what they didn't know? And so glad that you came aboard because I guess it eliminated them from creating an IT for department from scratch, correct?
That's right. And so, the thing to keep in mind, and there are plenty of wonderful IT people out there, systems administrators, network administrators that work for companies. And in the case of a one-man show, it's critical really to have another set of eyes, because if you think about, it's job preservation, right, for an IT person, just to make sure that everything is up and running and stable. Now, once I get it to a steady state, and I know all there is to know about the ins and outs of the entire infrastructure. What is my motivation to make change there? Right, I don't have a lot. I can put my feet up, right? Because
Yeah,
everything's
finally.
working. I know where all the buttons are. I know where the skeletons are. So what is my motivation to help the organization forward from a technology point of view? So it's important to have a second set of eyes that can come in and say, why do you have why do you have 3 servers and you only have 20 employees, kind of a thing? Why aren't you using leveraging the cloud more? The best question a consultant can ask is why, right? And when you get in an organization like I'm describing, what's the motivation for the owner to go back to the IT person and go, why are we doing this? As long as everything's working, it doesn't matter, right? Because my core business is in IT. So if everything's working, I have no reason to ask any questions, right? So you start to, things start to grow cobwebs, right? And, technology changes at the speed of light, as we all know. So why aren't we leveraging these new things? And, the next thing that's coming down the pike is artificial intelligence, AI, right? So, and those are things that a traditional IT administrator are not going to have an understanding of and how it can even impact the business.
Makes sense. Speaking of questions, from a compliance perspective, Are you seeing more clients or professionals asking you about frameworks like NIST and SIS controls or CMMC? And how are you helping them stay audit ready? Because I know that you do a lot of work with registered insurance advisors and things where compliance is a reality, not just a nice to have. So, what are you seeing there?
Yeah, registered investment advisors. That's those are big ones. They have very onerous compliance needs, and it's a lot to get through, right? And there has to be a lot of controls in place. What people don't know is that the NIST framework is kind of the foundation for most of the other compliances out there, whether that's HIPAA or FINRA. CMMC is becoming more of a standard, not so much necessarily for smaller organizations, but certainly for the mid-market. Um, and that coupled with SOC 1 and SOC 2 certifications, those are becoming more and more important, particularly when there's technologies and other customers' data involved.
And that, I guess that goes hand in hand with keeping you in compliance for not only for the regulators, but for the security insurance that you mentioned. Are there particular verticals where you seem to stand out more and have more of an impact than others? I got to think, legal comes to mind, but I guess anything where you're protecting the customer's data and as well as the business's data.
I would say, irrespective of vertical, we can have an impact from a cybersecurity perspective, of course. But if it's an industry that has a compliance, an overarching compliance, like medical practices being an example with HIPAA, certainly financial services, independent insurance agencies, organizations, CPA firms, organizations that have personal identifiable information, PII, or personal health information, PHI, any critical data that needs to be protected, whether it be compliance based or otherwise, right? There's, I think, the education space, and you've got all the student data, right? That's got to be protected. So there's rarely, I mean, there are industries like, let's take say a manufacturer, right? That they may not be protecting customer data, meaning like they're not protecting student data, they're not protecting financial information for their customers, right? But they still have to protect their network from from being attacked as well. So, but to answer your question, it's those organizations that have other people's data, right? Those are the ones that generally will have stringent compliance requirements and need those cybersecurity services to protect them and protect their customers.
Well, that's good because, it's not just about keeping everything running, but you guys still do the old favorites too, the old backup and restore. Because I recently had a computer that I didn't realize it was the middle of a backup and it sort of froze. And I thought about you in that instant because I was like, a thunderstorm, an unintended event, these things could cripple businesses. So if maybe they don't have, large financial things and they're not, bound by the FCC, would you recommend even smaller businesses give you a call to see what we can do just on a base level to keep the lights on literally when the unexpected happens?
For sure. Backup and disaster recovery plans are important. Now, to what level is dependent on the business, right? So this concept of a recovery time objective and recovery point objective, right? Restore point objectives rather, RTO and RPO. So how fast do I need to get back up and running, and how much data loss am I willing to uh, endure in the event of an act of God or something along those lines. And interestingly, many of the compliances and cyber policies now are starting to ask the question: do you have a backup of your data? How often is that backup happen? How much retention is there? Those are questions now that are being asked as part of cyber insurance again, and those compliances.
Seems like this is ever evolving, but sometimes the foundational work doesn't go away. In closing, I just wanted to reiterate that sometimes businesses aren't sure of what they need. But I just wanted to get your thoughts on, and I don't want to throw around hybrid, but a lot of businesses have people out in the field, and a lot of businesses are returning to work, but some are still remaining on the road by nature. Do you have any solutions that you offer to sort of have like end to end, regardless of device? And that sounds to me like, since it works so well, that are they cost effective? Are they something a business can afford in your
Yeah, so remote workforce is still very much in play. It had been, and even to a greater extent now. It's becoming more of a challenge, right? Because it's created additional attack surfaces from a cyber perspective. So those users still need to be secure, they need to be supported, and they should really have, mobile device management implemented for those users. In the event that there is a lost laptop, lost mobile device, lost tablet, whatever it might be, those devices can be shut down and data wiped, so that there's no leakage, if you will. There's no data leaks from whoever happens to come across those devices, or maybe stole them intentionally, as it might be. So
right?
yeah, they absolutely have to be protected and considered as part of the overall security of the environment.
Yeah, data leak protection is definitely something that I'm seeing a lot of as I research this. Do you come from the notion that everything should be done in house, or I understand you have some great white label partners? If you, without going too much into it, could you just tell me what you're excited about in 2025 for protecting businesses end to end with proactive threat detection and remediation?
Yeah, I would say the two biggest advancements we've seen are in the areas of advanced detection and response, which we've touched on, and then data loss prevention and encryption. So the concept of data loss prevention has been around for a while, and there's platforms that do data loss prevention. The key with the platform that we use is, number one, not only being able to see where data is and where it's flowing to and through, but also being able to put a number against that. Actually a monetary figure that shows, hey, this is what your data is worth on the dark web right now, kind of a deal. And then classifying that information, and then determining of that information, what do we want to encrypt, and through the same platform being able to encrypt that information so that it is only usable by the organization that has its own unique agent on each device. So without that agent, the data would be useful. So if a hacker got in and exfiltrated medical records, and then those medical records were encrypted with your unique agent, the data is useless to them. So that's just another layer of protection on top of traditional data loss prevention.
Yeah, that seems like a fundamental shift because originally it protected servers and now it's going out and finding everything. And like we talked about the hybrid workforce and mobile devices. And so, and be able to see a monetary benefit, that's good for business owners to know that. I think they know they should do this. I think they know they should talk to you or a professional like you. And but yet there's always budgetary restraints. But when you press that against of if you don't do it, what could happen, and you're educated on that, it's a nice mix of what you do for businesses to keep them up and running and prepared. And how long does usually a discovery call last? Or I guess it matters how well it progresses, but how much of a time commitment is a bare minimum for busy business owners thinking that even if they have something in place, just to get a fresh pair of eyes, like you said, on it.
Yeah, so I want to make one additional point to your last comment of, there's a balance on budget and protection. But if folks don't have cyber insurance, they absolutely should have it. And one thing to keep in mind is those premiums for those policies, are dependent upon what controls are in place. So by having controls in place, you may pay less for your cyber insurance policy. And in fact, we've helped organizations save 30% on their cyber insurance just by having the proper controls in place through a
Wow.
standard audit. Um, an initial discovery call would be no more than 30 minutes, just to get a lay of the land and understanding of the environment as they know it, understanding where they believe their gaps are, where their pain points might be, and then we set about starting to craft a solution to address those areas for them, and then move forward from there.
Excellent. Speaking of 30 minutes, we're coming up on time, and I know you're busy. I appreciate you taking the time and look forward to many more advancements coming out of Empowered IT. Thank you very much.
You bet, Mark. It was my pleasure.